Hey, what's up everyone? This is Zach and I am here with an album review for you guys. So we are continuing with the Asia Marathon, the Asia series of reviews. So we will be continuing the Asia reviews with Asia's second studio album, Alpha, which released in 1983, just a year after their debut album. So after that big album, in 1982, Asia would hop right back into the studio and record their second album, which is Alpha. And I think that this is a solid follow-up, and dare I say, it's kind of underrated. And it's kind of sad because Asia wouldn't really find that same level of success that they've had with the debut album. Now, Alpha, I think, did well enough for itself. It sold fairly well, but not as well as their debut album. Now, yes, it's not as strong as Asia's debut album, but I still think Alpha is a good album. Now, of course, for those who don't know, the lineup of Asia, at least the original lineup of Asia, you got many progressive rock legends. You have Steve Howe of Yes, you have Carl Palmer, of course, from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and you have John Wetton from King Crimson and UK, and you also have Jeff Downes in the band, who I think even still to this day is one of the only remaining original members of Asia. So there's that. But Alpha, I actually do like as an album. It's, again, not as strong as their debut, and I think the reason for that is it's not as memorable as their debut, and the album is a little more lightweight compared to their debut, and yeah, it's just, again, not as memorable, maybe not as creative as their debut, maybe not as ambitious as their debut. I mean, whatever it is you want to say when we compare the two albums, the first two Asia albums. But with that being said, I still think Alpha is a good album for what it is. I mean, you got some solid songs on here. Don't Cry is a decent way to open up this album. It's definitely very catchy, and it is one of the more commercial sounding songs from this album. And then you've got The Smile Has Left Your Eyes, which again, like with Don't Cry, it is pretty mainstream sounding, commercial sounding, but I dig the melody of this song. I think The Smile Has Left Your Eyes is one of the highlights on this album, and I think John Wetton is really giving it his all vocally in that song. And then you've got Never in a Million Years, which is a solid song. I don't mind that one. And then we've got one of my personal favorites on this album, My Own Time, I'll Do What I Want. This is definitely a very catchy song, a very memorable song, and the whole band just sounds great together in this song. And yeah, it's definitely a fun song to listen to for sure. Catchy. And then we've got The Heat Goes On, which is another one of my personal favorites on this album, which I've heard some fans say that this could have passed as like a B-side from their first album or a leftover track from the first album, which I can definitely hear that for sure. And it is a great song. Definitely one of the highlights on this album. I have always liked The Heat Goes On. Definitely solid. And then we've got Eye to Eye, which is one of the lesser known songs on this album, and I think it's good. Not one of the best songs on the album, but I dig it. And then we've got The Last to Know. It's decent. Again, like with Eye to Eye, it's not one of the better songs on the album, but it's decent. True Colors, I could really say the same for that, but not bad though. Now, Midnight Sun, that is also one of the lesser known songs on this album, and to me, I think when it comes to the lesser known songs, this is actually a great song and probably one of my favorites on this album. I have always really liked Midnight Sun. I dig John Wetton's vocals, especially on that track. And then we've got Open Your Eyes, which is the closing track. Another one of my favorites on this album, and maybe even my favorite song from this album. I have always loved the song Open Your Eyes, and I think John Wetton sounds great. The rest of the guys, and the band sound great in that song too. And I think Carl's drumming in that song sounds great too. So Open Your Eyes, definitely one of the highlights on this album, and I've always thought it was a great song from Asia, and definitely a solid way to wrap up this album. So overall, Alpha, it's a solid album. I do dig this one. I mean, there's a few tracks on this album that you could argue are somewhat forgettable, some of those being The Last to Know and True Colors, but even those songs aren't bad. And with the first album, again, you know, when we're comparing Alpha to the first album, I mean, the first album definitely had more memorable and catchier songs, but there's still some of that on this album. As far as catchy songs go, I mean, Don't Cry is definitely one of them, and My Own Time is another catchy song from this album too. Overall, Alpha, it's a solid rock album. Definitely poppy for sure, but I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, because I think for what they're going for here, it's good. I think this album just works. I mean, it's a pretty good follow-up to the first album. Yes, it is a step down, but just because it's a step down, that doesn't mean that the album is no good at all. So, yeah, but Alpha, it's a good album. I've never disliked it. I've never had any issues with it. I think it's good. So, if I were to give Alpha by Asia a rating or a score, their second studio album, I would give this album probably, I would say a light 8 out of 10 is what I would give this album. So let me know what you think of Alpha, the second studio album by supergroup Asia. So let me know what you think, and we will move on to the third album here soon, which is Astra. So that's my review for Alpha, though. Again, overall, it's not as good as their debut, but still quite good. So with that being said, thank you for watching. Take care and have a good one.